¿Qué tal amigos de Latino Hispano? ¿Cómo están? Soy Edson Velázquez y ahora estamos aquí en el centro Banamex, en la Jedicon, que se dio este 19 y 20 de julio. Una gran experiencia para todos los que somos fans del universo Star Wars. Hay actores, productores, hay gente que estuvo en la mercadotecnia de Star Wars directamente trabajando con George Lucas, y todo este nacimiento, esta gran experiencia, este gran universo que a muchos nos ha fascinado. Así que vamos a hacer este recorrido.
Hi, I'm Roger Christian, Academy Award winner for the first Star Wars and director of second unit for Return of the Jedi and Phantom Menace, and greetings to everybody here in Mexico. It happened in Mexico, in Guaymas. I was on a huge film here called Lucky Lady, starring Lisa Minnelli, Burt Reynolds and Gene Hackman. It was a massive movie, and I was working with the designer, John Barry, and when Fox would only put up $4 million to make his movie with, the writers of Lucky Lady, Gloria and Willard Hike, they wrote some American Graffiti and some parts for George Lucas for Star Wars. So George Lucas flew down with Gary Kurtz to meet us because they told him we were doing, it was a film set in the 20s, rum running, but we were creating old Guaymas buildings into sets. And George wanted a spaghetti western, and they said, Roger and John are doing exactly what you want. So he flew down to meet us. So my entire work on Star Wars all began in Mexico, in Guaymas. Well, I grew up with mythology. I love King Arthur, and I read a lot about myth and legend. So when I read the script, I knew what was under the surface. I had become friends with George over those few days we were together. I love Kurosawa. He was my mentor as a filmmaker. And Sergio Leone, who remade every Kurosawa movie into a spaghetti western. So I connected right into it straight away. And I knew when I read it how wonderful this script was, I realized. And having the lightsaber, which was then called a laser sword, I knew that would be the icon of Star Wars. It's common knowledge, none of the studios believed in it. 20th Century Fox didn't believe in it, only Alan Ladd, the head of the studios. The crew we worked with didn't believe in it. They thought it was a child's fantasy, and science fiction was completely undervalued at the time. So I had to stick by George, who even today says there were only 5 people stuck by his side to get that film made. But I knew if we could pull this off, it would become very successful. I didn't like science fiction films up until when we made Star Wars, because none of them were real. And I think that's why audiences never, ever related to them. They looked over-designed, false. The guns in particular looked plastic. My mission was to make a spaghetti space film, which was everything was real and used, and for an audience never to question that they weren't watching a world that absolutely existed and was real. And so with no money and no time, I decided to rent all the weapons and use real ones and adapt them, because that way I knew we could afford it. because I could take them back at the end of the film and it would only be rental charge. And I decided to go on my own, and I made the blaster for the stormtroopers out of a Sterling submachine gun, which to me was a science fiction weapon anyway. I just stuck T-strip round the barrel and stuck sights on the top. George had always called Han Solo a cowboy in space, so I found the Mauser, which was a German gun that looked to me like a science fiction pistol, and again stuck sights on the top and changed it a bit, and that's when I called George to come and have a look, because if he didn't like them or thought, no, this is not right, I was off, I was fired. He loved them and stayed with me, and we made Princess Leia's pistol. They could fire on set. We had single bullets in them, and they could have a puff of smoke and light at the end. They were heavy and real, and actors weren't pretending. They were having to handle them as weapons. That set the standard for me for everything I did from then on. All of it. I remember everything. But one special moment to me was the cast were with George. The director of photography wasn't. He doesn't like anything and was very miserable. And so when we started, Sir Alec Guinness was cast, and he was this great British actor from theatre, films, coming on board. And I was there when he did his first take, and everybody, I think, was questioning this young American kid. We were all like students, we were treated like that. When Alec Guinness came to do the first shot in the desert, he had his robes on, and people were a bit in awe of him. He, on his own, without saying anything, got down and rolled in the sand to make his costume feel more natural and look better. And I think that moment, George gained huge credibility, because everybody thought, wow, if Alec Guinness is doing this, there must be something here that we're doing. No, it's greatly expanded the experience that we can do now, but even AI, I was asked to lecture on this. My answer is this: when George Lucas wrote Star Wars, he took the entire plot from a Kurosawa movie called Forbidden Planet, where there were two peasants, tall and short, got wrapped up in a war they didn't have anything to do with, got released in a desert, had a fight, separated, were rescued out by a princess who needed their help to fight the evil empire who was taking over her kingdom. So it's exactly the same as if you used AI. He would have entered that in and it would have come back as a story. But AI can only do what's out there. CGI can only do what is created by a creators. It's not a thing in itself. So George's huge ability on every single film he wrote could not be made. There was no technology to do it, but we did on first one and other ones, and people figure out a way how to do it. Nowadays we have a toolbox that is just unbelievably complete. You can do anything nowadays. It doesn't make good movies. The stories, the actors, and the creator who does it make good movies.
Luke's, this one, the original. This is the symbol of Star Wars. It's the iconic image of Star Wars, and that one, that's the first one I ever made, and that's my favorite. I prefer the Jedi lightsabers because there was Luke's, Obi-Wan's, Yoda's, all of these. But I'm with Theory Sabers, and we sold originally my original one. I've designed a lightsaber called the Father for Darth Vader that I think he should have had, because I only made his out of an old piece of camera, and I never thought it justified Darth Vader. So that one is special as well to me. Well, everything, I'm always somebody who looks forward and use technology and everything, but I still think that first movie had an organic kind of nature because everything was real. We had to shoot it. And so I think that's very special, and I think that's why it's very special with the fans. But I loved, say, in The Force Awakens, I love seeing Ren and that lightsaber with the two blades on it and cutting the trees and stuff. We could never do that ever, but it can be done now, and it's real. So as long as it's absolutely real and not going back to silly sci-fi fantasy, I call it, as long as it's absolutely real and sticks to the George Lucas, when we made Star Wars, we always said we're making a documentary, we're not making a science fiction film. And as long as it all has that original motive behind the look, then it's okay. Yeah, this is all the originals, and I've only just done it now because I've teamed up with Theory Sabers, and they wanted to do a version of my very original, which we sold out, 200 of them. They asked me if I'd do another one, and so I designed what I think Darth Vader should have. So that's coming out new. Won't be in the movies, but it's what the fans have all told me they want.
My name's Tuck Sakandani. I played Master Jedi Agent Kolar in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. There's so many. I did 2 films, so Star Wars came to Sydney, my hometown, and I got my agent to look into trying to get me onto the film. The first time I went up for the film, I actually didn't make it. I got on the film, but I didn't actually get on screen or into the scene that I'd made, gotten pulled into the studio for. And then 2 weeks after that, I got a call from my agent again to say to go into the studio and to try to go to a department called Creatures that do all the prosthetics and all that kind of thing. And I went in. I almost said no. After my first experience of being there all day, not getting a look in at all. And then I got to the studio, got to Creatures. They tried a prosthetic on my head, which fitted. Then the guy from Creatures, the head of the department, got on the phone and said, "Oh, it fits him." And then he said to me, "Oh, look, they want to see you at wardrobe." So I had to go down to the wardrobe department, and I got to the wardrobe, and they said, "Oh, just try that costume on over there in a fitting room," and it was a Jedi's costume, and everything else rolled out from there. I was meant to actually replace a guy who was playing the character Eth Koth, but then when they shot and filmed everything, they realized that I was physically so different from the original guy from the first film that they created my character, Agent Kolar.
My name is Craig Miller, and my title at Lucasfilm was Director of Fan Relations.
which was part of the publicity department. I worked on Star Wars, the first movie, and The Empire Strikes Back, doing general publicity, writing press releases, dealing with reporters and magazines and newspapers. But I also had a specialty of working with fans and fandom. So I would go to conventions and do slideshows, presentations about Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back when it was coming out. I worked with fan clubs and stuff, excuse me, and also did things. I created the official Star Wars fan club, wrote all the issues of the newsletter, which was called Bantha Tracks. And I did all kinds of other things. I was producer for Lucasfilm on a lot of efforts. We put R2-D2 and C-3PO on Sesame Street, and I produced those for Lucasfilm, and I operated R2-D2. We brought Tony Daniels in to be C-3PO for those. We did 5 episodes of Sesame Street. Award shows, some TV commercials, that sort of thing. I operated R2-D2. People today don't remember or are too young to know. Back in today, every other movie is science fiction or superheroes. In the 70s, people thought science fiction was for little kids. They didn't think grown-ups went to science fiction. 20th Century Fox did market research, and they asked people, what types of movies did you like? And they showed them a list: war movies, comedies, mysteries. Science fiction always came out at the bottom of the list. And in fact, the market research people said, don't make this movie, because no one wants to see science fiction. And if you do make the movie, don't call it Star Wars, because no one wants to see a movie with war in the title. Because we were still in Vietnam, the US was, and they thought people didn't understand what the title meant. So that was one of the things we had to work against to convince people. And we spent an entire year working to convince people that they did want to see this movie. And even after Star Wars came out, people would say, well, I like Star Wars, but I still don't like science fiction. And slowly over the next 10 years, people became more and more interested in science fiction as more interesting science fiction movies started coming out. But before then, it was a very hard sell, both to studios. Most every studio in Hollywood turned down Star Wars, and to audiences. And that's why, we worked so hard and did so many different things that were atypical for the way you marketed movies to get people to see Star Wars. Star Wars really, it changed the world in a lot of ways. Certainly in terms of entertainment and things, but for me, it was a big difference. I grew up in Los Angeles, but all of my degrees are all in psychology. I loved movies and I loved science fiction, but I had no thought how I could get into the movie business. And I just sort of stumbled into the job of being one of the publicity people with Star Wars. Because of my background, I'd always been a science fiction fan, so I was able to help the people who came out of the movie business interface with the world of science fiction and comic book fans. But I ended up spending, it's been 50 years since almost 50 years since I started on Star Wars, and my career has always been off of that. With Lucasfilm for almost 4 years, and I spent 10 years marketing other movies, Jim Henson, Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal. And for the last 30 plus years, I've been writing television, mostly animation. But suddenly my life went from psychology to the movie and television business. Plus, when I was working at Lucasfilm, I would go to conventions, science fiction conventions, comic book conventions, to do the presentations to keep people interested in the Star Wars movies. And I went to a convention in Chicago to promote The Empire Strikes Back, and I met a woman there through a mutual friend, and we started dating, and now we've been married for almost 40 years. So that really changed my life. That's a hard question. There's so many, you know. It was going into a whole different world. Plus, as a science fiction fan, suddenly when I stepped onto the sound stage for the ice cave, the Hoth Ice Cave, which was a gigantic stage. It was the largest sound stage in Europe at the time, completely dressed as that ice cave. It was just amazing. It was suddenly I was really making movies. We were really, and we were really there in a science fiction world, making just an incredible adventure. You know, a lot of people before Star Wars, even the people working on Star Wars, didn't know what it was going to be like. Would it be good? Would it be successful? But by the time of Empire, everyone knew, and this was just stepping into that stage and seeing that gigantic ice cave filled with X-wings and snow speeders and rebel pilots and Han Solo and Chewbacca. They were on top of the Millennium Falcon, that scene where they're repairing the Falcon. That was like the first thing I saw when I went to Elstree Studios. And that was just an incredible memory for someone like me who grew up reading science fiction and comics. Well, I have to go with Jedi because I'm basically a nice guy. But it's true, when people used to write in fan mail, my staff answered all the fan mail. And when little kids would write in, they wouldn't write to the actors, they'd write to the characters like R2-D2. And when they'd write to Darth Vader, I was the one who signed Darth Vader's autograph on all the photos that got mailed out. So I have a little fondness for Darth Vader too.
¿No has visto al Vader?
No, la neta ni idea, güey.
Vamos a buscarlo. ¿Sabes qué? Vamos a dejar aquí tantito la cámara.
Hola, mi nombre es Deva y estoy encargada de la parte de la meditación en Jedi Knight Academy. Jedi Knight Academy es una academia de combate con sable de luz que ayuda a que toda la gente que es fanática de Star Wars tenga combate con sable de luz, sí, con un sable de luz. Llevamos 5 años dando clases de academia y lo único que necesitan es traer ropa cómoda y nosotros les podemos prestar un sable. Además, pueden adquirir un sable con nosotros también. Contamos con 3 sedes en la Ciudad de México, que es Condesa, Venustiano Carranza y Coyoacán. Tenemos clases de miércoles a sábado de 7 de la noche a 10 de la noche y la clase suelta tiene un costo de 200 pesos o bien puedes inscribirte con un paquete de 800 pesos por 4 clases al mes. Las redes sociales que tenemos son JKAMX y para adquirir tu sable de luz es LFS.
Juega a ser grande en Kitsania, la ciudad donde aprendes jugando. Sé un técnico de alimentos. Únete al equipo de trabajo de un supermercado o conviértete en un veterinario para cuidar de los peluditos. Visita Kitsania en Monterrey, Guadalajara o en la Ciudad de México, que están ubicados en Tujulco y Santa Fe. Conoce las fechas y eventos especiales en Facebook, Kitsania, México.
Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo están? Yo soy el Mexilorian. Pues, como todos aquí, fans de Star Wars, obviamente ya un gusto por la saga, por todo lo que implica Star Wars. Y en algún momento quise hacer a Boba Fett, pero cuando salió el Mandaloriano me enamoré, pero de la armadura pre-Beskar, de la café. Entonces dije, esa armadura está súper guau. Y ya que sale la serie y empezamos a ver que en el segundo o tercer capítulo le cambian la armadura por la Beskar, dije, no, la Beskar es la que es una joyita. Todo es comprado, bueno, se manda a hacer. Depende qué pieza se manda a hacer con distintas personas. Hay personas que se especializan solo en la armadura y el casco. La ropa, otra persona es alguien que la hace exclusivamente ropa de Star Wars. Los detalles de las correas de piel fueron con un sastre local de aquí en la Ciudad de México. Los detalles de metal de los cartuchos son torno, de alguien que maneja torno de Star Wars, no me acuerdo bien quién era. Entonces depende mucho de las piezas, pero va siendo muy específico el creador de cada pieza. Fueron alrededor de $2,500, $3,000 más o menos. Pues sesiones de fotos tengo de algunas ocasiones pasadas. Se va a una locación, se hace la sesión como cosplayer, se sube a redes sociales, se venden los prints en eventos. Eventos próximos, me parece ser que ahorita no. Ahorita este es el último de este lapso del año. Esperemos vengan más. Y pues los eventos y más que tal, el movimiento en redes, el público que nos apoya es lo que nos ayuda a seguir acá. En redes sociales me pueden encontrar en Instagram como el Mexilorian, en Facebook también como el Mexilorian y en TikTok como el Mexilorian Cos. Obi-Wan.
Shakti, obvio. Leia.
Rojo 7, piloto rebelde.
Darth Vader.
Padme.
Rose Tico.
No sé, Dooku.
Yo diría que Finn.
Ay, Guido.
Ah, caray, Palpatine.
Uy, se me olvida este horrendo del episodio 7, ¿cómo se llama? Snoke.
Jedi.
Jedi.
Me gusta un poco la doctrina Jedi, pero me parece muy limitada con muchas cosas.
Jedi.
Azul.
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 Verde.
Azul.
Yo creo que... ese está muy difícil. ¿Podría ser la Y-Wing o el Snow Speeder?
Yo creo que el halcón.
La N1.
Clásico, el halcón milenario.
Squid.
Un X-Wing.
Episodio 5.
La de El regreso del Sith.
El episodio 5. Por mucho.
El Imperio contraataca.
Si estamos hablando de Star Wars, claro, es el 4, 5 y 6.
El Imperio contraataca.
Amigos, este fue el recorrido de la Jedicon aquí en el centro Banamex. Espero que lo hayan disfrutado. Fue una gran experiencia para todos los que somos fans de Star Wars y sobre todo la oportunidad de conocer gente que estuvo en el día a día de esta gran producción que a muchos nos ha cambiado la vida. Gracias por acompañarnos.
Que la fuerza te acompañe.